Elizabeth to talk to me about some things that are very alive to us right now. Well, alive for me, and I hope alive to her in a shareable fashion. We're going to talk about what happened to us, how our experience, our reflections on the Midwestiary Fellowship of the Spirit, the philosophy and psychology of pilgrimage, and then that leads naturally into interreligious dialogue, which is actually a theme that came up at the Midwestiary because Elizabeth took a brave stand that got her into debate, in which she expressed love and the virtue of hospitality towards Muslims in her community with whom she has an ongoing relationship. And this, of course, is bumping up against, geopolitical issues around immigration and the clash between. And I'm putting all of this in scare quotes, which means I'm just reporting these terms.
Gesturing.
Yeah, gesturing. The clash between Islamic civilization and Christian civilization and all that sort of stuff. And so we're going to talk about all of that. And I want to let everybody know I am suffering from a Meniere's flare-up right now, so I might suddenly seem like I lose my balance. Unfortunately, because of my Meniere's, I was supposed to see Elizabeth in person in London not that long ago, and I couldn't go, and I missed that. But at least I'm glad I get to be with you in your lovely presence right now, Elizabeth. So thank you very much for being here. Welcome.
It's lovely to be here, John, and I think it is one of the benefits of the modern world is we get to do friendship via podcast. I think that it's has its uses.
So, Elizabeth, as I said, people are probably very familiar with you, but perhaps a little bit about yourself. What is spiritually, philosophically alive for you right now? What is calling to you? What are you working on? What are you setting your sights on? Just to give us, your context as you're coming into this.
Thank you, John. Wow. Well, I am and have been for a long time obsessed with relationship and the kind of fundamental relationality of reality.
Yes.
And that shows up in my thinking and writing, in the work I feel called to in terms of modeling that it's possible to have relationship, to relate to each other. Across divides is now this sort of like annoying buzzword. I guess I mean not just under the conditions of sameness. That there was a beautiful Zadie Smith quote in the New Yorker article this week where she said, "When I'm writing, I don't want to be relatable. Like, I don't need you to feel the same as me, but I do want to be in relation with you." That, and she used this phrase, something like solidarity being one of the possibilities. And so that's the thing I'm obsessed with at the moment. I think we've bought into a false idea that encounter with the other, that intimacy, that community, that relationships of all kind require sameness. And humans have a preference for sameness, right? We have homophily. It is not untrue that we are more comfortable around sameness. And I think both from my theological tradition and just from my experience of what makes a full and interesting and wise life, moving out from that, like having some stability in like, we can have both. We can have some, like, I live in a community house with people who are broadly quite like me, and I'm not embarrassed about that. And that creates a secure base from which I can go out and be in real human encounters with people radically different from me, and have deep friendships and learn a huge amount from people who are not like me. And it feels like that is increasingly controversial as a position, that's possible and indeed something we should be aiming for. And that worries me.
What a fantastic beginning, because this is exactly what I want to zero in on. I just thank you for that moment of resonance. And let's remember Hartmut Rose's point that resonance depends on the uncontrollability of the world. Uncontrollability of the world. So I want to pick up on this, and I want to tell you a little bit where my thinking is on this, and we can go back and forth And and again, I'm not after homogeneity, after your excellent point. So I've for a long time been critical of Cartesian substance, what Yunaris calls the monism of the self, or Charles Taylor's calls the buffered self, that we're this single substance that is self-defining and autonomous. Kant's fetishized word, autonomy, right? And then James Filler, I read his amazing book. I've had some conversations with him in which he makes the argument that, we get this obviously from Aristotle, and the idea that reality is like our language. We have nouns and verbs, so we have substances and predicates, and that's so reality is very much like our language. And of course, I'm very much into the non-propositional ways of knowing, and so this was always very and then it didn't stand well with relevance realization, which is not subjective or objective. So I'm reading Filler, and he makes the powerful argument that you basically, I won't review the argument. If anybody wants, go back and look at it, or read James's amazing 2 books. That you can't get relations out of substances, because a relation is not a property of a substance. It's not an action of a substance. It's not a privation of a substance. You apply all the Aristotelian things, and you can't get relations out of substances. So then he argues that the Neoplatonic tradition, which Heidegger bumped into without recognizing it, was trying to recover, was about relationality taking priority over substance. And I thought that's really, really good, really, really good. And at a pragmatic level, that is a powerful move to make, relationality. But then I got thinking, as I'm wont to do, and I realized there's a symmetrical argument that you can't get relata, you can't get the things of the relations out of pure relationality either. Exactly symmetrical argument. And if there are no relata that are in some sense distinct from relationality, then all relations are exactly the same. You get homogeneity because it's the relata that makes one relation different from the other. And then I bumped into William Desmond's Eastern Orthodox tradition, especially of Yunaris, which said, no, relata and relations co-emerge together, just like persons and communities. There are no persons without communities. There are no communities without persons. And then, so Desmond has what he calls the communal, right, notion, that being, the ultimate icon for being is common unity, as he sometimes puts it. And that, of course, for me, resonates very powerfully, because that gives you transjectivity, it gives you dialogos. And so that's where I'm coming from. I think you can make a very powerful argument. I don't have to make it. It's been made in many Eastern Orthodox corners, that the Trinity is not just, first of all, the Trinity is not a substantial relation, because the 3 persons are not 3 substances. That's a heresy, right? I think James is right. It's relational, but I think the Eastern Orthodox is even better. It's communal. That the Trinity is a communing, and all of reality participates in that ultimate reality that is at the heart. So that I'm giving you a Christian take on it. I can give you a Buddhist take with Net of Indra, very similar idea. How does that land for you? Because I'm going to be talking to William Desmond very soon. We're going to be recording a conversation, by the way.
Wonderful. Well, there's lots that new language or new names for me in there, but the heart of the thing feels just fundamentally true to me, that we are irreconcilably interdependent, and the fact, like, the conception of an individual is just really bad anthropology. It doesn't map to how we are. Like, it was a weird, I don't know if it was like an economic necessity or something, but it feels like a myth in the bad sense, a useful lie that has helped prop up a bunch of systems and has had all of these terrible unintended consequences of driving us away from each other. There's a thought hanging around the Trinity. I have a husband who's a philosopher who also has good Greek, and he talks about substance and understanding, that there was something that went wrong in the translation.
Yeah.
That led to this. And I was like, oh, understand, substance. I see the problem.
Yeah. Hypostasis. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but my Trinitarian theology is all intuitive rather than fleshed out. So I won't wade into the deep waters there. But I was in a conversation before this with some people working more on what does this reality of our kind of relational longings mean in policy, in like civic infrastructure. And I kept saying, can we bring it back to these deep things about the human being? And they're like, but what does it mean for systems? Which is sort of, we both need to create the conditions to live as we really are like made for each other, made by each other. I believe made for God and made by God, but I don't think you have to believe that bit to see the truth of this bit.
Yeah.
Although it helps. And they were talking about, forgive me, this is constellatory and it's lack of nearness, but that's okay. The crossover between theological understandings and therapeutic understandings. That you and I see the deep disconnecting, deracinating, isolating tides of our culture, and we go to philosophy and theology. He says for a lot of people, they feel the deep sense that we're not living towards fully aliveness. We're lonely, right? We are living in a meaning crisis.
Yes.
And they go to therapy.
Yes.
And we were playing with this idea, and I was like, therapy I'm not anti it. I think it has got there are schools of therapy which are incredibly life-giving and healing. I do not want to be one of those like, all therapy speak is terrible, but, and this is a phrase I said for the first time earlier, so I might disagree with myself later, but I said, I don't believe in self-love.
Mm-hmm.
Therapy says self-love is the answer, or a very individualized form of therapy says self-love is the answer. And I quoted you, I said, John Vervaeke says relationship is meaning is a relational concept. Love is a relational concept.
Yeah, very much.
We have to receive it and give it to each other. And the idea that we can be entire in ourselves is, I think, not kind and not fair.
I think that's right. And I'm going to resonate with you again. So I've been working with Arjun Arora. He's a student of mine on a thorough critique of the modern construct of meaning, which is both the folk construct, the sort of cultural notion of it, and mostly also the academic construct, which is patterned on it. And this is the idea that meaning is a personal sort of feeling in which your self-esteem is somehow soothed. I won't go into these arguments in great detail because I'm going to do a video essay on this very shortly. Meaning doesn't work that way. This is Wittgenstein and Heidegger, the two greatest philosophers of the last century. Sorry, meaning doesn't work that way. Meaning has to be shareable. It has to be mutually correctable. It has to be evolving. It has to put a normative demand on you, both individually and collectively. It has to do all of this. That's why across cultures and history, the cultivation of meaning in life was always interwoven with the cultivation individually and collectively of wisdom. They were inseparably bound together. Ours is the culture, in its wonderful wisdom, has decided, no, we don't need to do that. We can just make it a personal preference that's held inside the autonomous self. And I really don't care about soothing people's self-esteem for two reasons. One is, by and large, it looks like self-esteem as a construct has been damaging overall. I don't doubt that it has helped some people, but overall, it has been a bad construct. It has misrepresented and then misled people in powerful ways. Also, soothing is not the point of meaning, right? Sometimes we should soothe people. That's a virtuous thing to do. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but the point of is ultimately communing that affords communication, right? And if I'm in soothing mode, I am completely egocentric, which is antithetical to the mode I need to be in when I am communicating and communing, right? And that's my deep criticism. How does that Does that land for you? Because I think these problems you're talking about right, about self-love and I'll do a neologism here, self-meaning, are just deeply interwoven, and it's part of the it's part of the self-selfing of autonomy. Kant's great fetish, right? The autonomous self.
Yeah, from my understanding, and I did some reading around this in the writing of Fully Alive, like, self-esteem.
That's Elizabeth's book, by the way, and I'm not going to let it go by without shamelessly promoting it. Fully Alive is a great book. Read it, buy it, your life will be better. Go out and get it. It's on Amazon. It's a great read. It's well written, beautiful mixture of her own narrative and philosophical, theological reflection. Buy the book. It's an excellent book. I strongly recommend it. Please continue, Elizabeth. Yes.
Thank you. You're a great hype man. So the book is structured by the 7 deadly sins. I have a chapter on envy, which is really about status anxiety. And it's how do we find a stable sense of self in what can be a really cruel world, right? How do we have internal steadiness so that we have that secure base where we can seek to listen to other people without just needing to get something from them? And the classic answer has been self-esteem, right? Or self-love. And the more time I spent with this concept, the more it just began to fall apart in my hands. Because
scientifically too, it falls apart. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. And Rowan Williams writes about this a little bit, that from our very first moments, Andy Crouch says this, from our very first moments, we are in search of a gaze, right? A baby is looking for 2 eyes turned towards it. To make me weep. I read this line about the mother's face is the baby's first mirror.
Yes.
We literally see ourselves through others seeing us.
Yes.
And our brain structures is laid down and does not form properly except in relationship, except in attention, except in listening, except in contemplation and responsiveness to the other. And so I think what we're trying to get at when we talk about self-love and self-esteem, there's something possible there, which is if we have received that, we can recall it to ourselves, right? We can, we can take what has been spoken over us and remind us of it. But that if we've never received it,
we're damaged. Yeah.
How are we supposed to just conjure it?
Yes. So 2 things about that. Siegel's notion that human connections shape neural connections, which shape human connections, which shape neural connections.
In
the loop. And that's why we're always indwelling others and internalizing others, Vygotsky. And then I want to move, of course, to what is becoming clear, which is all the work around secure attachment. That's not the Buddhist notion of attachment. That's from Bowlby, right, and others, that describing exactly what we become metacognitively reflective and narratively extended beings. We're not just agents; we're selves, and then we come into an obligation. We are the only beings that make promises. We come into obligation, so we become selves and persons dialogically. That is, there is no selfhood without dialogos. There's no personhood without dialogos. Now, that doesn't mean you can't carry people around in your head, because you do, and so you can be in solitude and in dialogos in an imaginal fashion, but that you can't generate it. It is not self-generated, and it is not self-maintained. Now, what the research is showing, and this, my friend Jeff McDonald at the University of Toronto, who does relationship psychology, says, attachment theory, I hope you take this humorously and not sacrilegiously. He says, relationship, attachment theory is the way, the truth, and the life of relationships of human. And the idea is, if you remember in that theory, if the child forms a secure attachment with the mother, notice it's not an autonomous capability. It's a secure attachment that affords the child the ability to explore its environment. It'll return to the mom, check in, go and explore. And then what we've now found, contrary to a couple decades of bullshit where, what was it, codependent, dysfunctional codependency or something. People who are in secure romantic relationships are much better at exploring their environment and entering into friendships than people who are not in secure romantic relationships. So the evidence and the argument are piling up, right? It's just that is not. Now, I want to something up with you, because we're leaping ahead, we're leaping around, but let's just follow the logos where it goes, as Socrates would say. So I've been, one of the things that occurred to me on the philosophical Silk Road and became sort of clear, what was sort of nascent before, and it really gelled. And I was trying it on with quite a few of my interlocutors, and they seemed to like the idea. And I was proposing, now give me a moment on this. I was proposing that one's relationship to one's home religion, a religion in which one finds home, that's what I mean by that phrase, is erotic, not in the Freudian sense, but in the Greek sense, right? It's eros, right? And that what you need is you need a secure attachment to your home religion that then allows you to deeply and powerfully explore and learn and love other religions, Buddhism, Taoism, etc., so that you can enter into the kind of mutual transformation we enter into with our friends. When I was talking to Zevi Slavin about this, we were talking about Ibn Gabriel and whether or not there is such a thing as Jewish philosophy. Is that can we say that? And what it came down to was, to use that metaphor, Zevi and I can enter into deep philia, so that philia sophia is possible between us. We do it all the time. You and I do it too. But Zevi can never know what I have with Sarah. No one can know that, right? Now, he can talk about his relationship to his beloved. I can talk about mine, and we can help each other, and we can maybe even transform each other in a really important, virtuous way. I could say, you shouldn't treat your other person like that, and that may actually, right? But do you see the model I'm trying to get? Could we, is there something analogous at the level of interreligious dialogue where people, and I'm using the analogy very powerfully. A lot of people don't have secure attachment styles. They have disorganized, they have avoidant, they have anxious. Are there analogous problems with a religious attachment that can be addressed so that people can come into secure attachment, so they can enter into philosophia with other religions, not just other people? Every Christian should love Buddhists, but I think every Christian should also love Buddhism. There's a really good book out by Paul Knitter called Without Buddha, I Couldn't Be a Christian. And there's things like that. So I'm wondering, given that we're acknowledging this relationality, and let me just push it a little bit farther. This is, I'm reading a book called Circling the Elephant by John Thadamanilil, quite a name. And he does, he does the proverb of the blindfolded people touching the elephant. We're all familiar with it. And then he critiques it and says what's wrong with it and qualifies it and then builds on it.
I hate that.
No. So no, there's no naive, but he's trying to save the baby from all the bathwater of that proverb, right? He's trying to save it from mere liberal tolerance or blah, 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 blah. And he says, well, one of the things we have to do, though, is, we have to acknowledge no religion is an island. No religion has autonomously emerged autotheontically from the earth or something. All religions are syncretistic and synergistic. They're not static, and they're not homogeneous, right? There isn't a Christianity. There is a family of Christianities. There's a family of Buddhism, right? And so they're not static, they're not isolated, they're not homogeneous. And he said, then that if we remove the myth of the autonomy, do you see the analogy I'm trying to build here, of our religions, just like you and I are trying to undermine the autonomy of the self, that's right, of individuals, could we then realize the actual evolving dialogical nature of religion and have a deep affordance of interreligious dialogue while still having what I mentioned before? People can have their secure attachment to their home religion that actually affords and empowers them in deep dialogos from which they can deeply learn and to which they can deeply love other religions. That's the proposal. That's what's coming from me from the Philosophical Silk Road.
Interesting.
I'm sure you have.
I'm going to talk.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm going to talk because that's how I will figure out what I think.
Okay.
So the bit of scripture that was coming to mind on that attachment was, to be very on brand, go straight for the Bible, is we love because he first loved us.
Yes.
And therefore, I think you can make an analogy that, and the language that I'm most familiar with in my tradition is discipleship. That as a Christian, if I take seriously how loved I am, if I take seriously what my tradition teaches about my sort of fundamental safety, not that I won't suffer or struggle in this life, but that justice will roll down like a river and he will wipe every tear from every eye. Like that, the end of the story is good for us all. And that's, that's complicated theologically there, but let's not double click on it right now. Then I can have the fundamental steadiness that a secure attachment gives you. Jonathan Rauch, who's a political scientist, he's a gay atheist, but he's writing a lot about Christianity at the moment in the States. And he says one of the fundamental things about Christianity seems to be that it teaches you not to be afraid. Where did that bit go? If I have a secure attachment to Jesus, I can move through the world. And some days I can live this, and some days I really can't. Unafraid. And in that steadiness, that knowing myself beloved, not because I've earned it, but because of the gift of grace, and taking seriously the possibility, as my tradition teaches, that we can live in this world and not be afraid, then I can encounter the other from that steady base. I can be not in fight or flight. I can be not in defensiveness. I can not be in the need to win and prove.
Yes.
I can trust that the Spirit is already at work in their life and that they are beautifully and wonderfully made, and that we are somehow siblings, that we are somehow given to each other. And there is this complexity in Christianity, right? Where Jesus does say, I am the way and the truth and the life.
Yeah, but what does the I mean there?
Yeah. What does it mean?
Yeah.
But there is something about so the bad version of this is, I think, just mushy relativism.
I'm not advocating for that.
No, I know you're not. Absolutely not. Like, everything is basically the same. All religions teach the same things. There's no particularity in here. I just think that's nonsense. I think there's some truth claims. There are some truth claims and they clash. But when we are sufficiently rooted and grounded in love, then we can tolerate the tension of that and learn from each other and listen to each other and encounter each other without being triggered into this conflictual mode. And I've certainly found that that's, and it's what I said right at the beginning, like deep roots and wide branches. Relationship doesn't have to be predicated on sameness. I think and I hope that it's entirely possible.
Well, that's good. And thank you. I like what you said there about, you need the difference for relationality to not degenerate into homogeneity. And of course, we have pursued homogeneity either through an imperialism, my religion should conquer yours, destroy yours, or an infantilism. Your religion is an earlier, immature version of mine, and I'm going to help you grow up to my religion. Both of those are homogenization strategies. Now, notice that's which is it? I don't know. I think I'm just trying to make sure I get my attribution right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's that Manalil says, notice we don't want musical homogeneity. We want musical diversity. Notice we want dietary diversity. Notice we want ecological diversity. And I would say we need relevance realization diversity. And so there's a deep, I think what you're helping me to see is there's a co-criticism of what I've been calling the autonomy view of religion, which I think is a projection of the autonomous view of the self, and all these strategies of homogenization, which you have been properly critiquing. I mean, that's part of what your talk was doing in Chicago. Now, I wonder if we can be a little bit more concrete, because David Brown, I should say, David Brown, not Dan Brown. People, what, Dan Brown? No, not Dan Brown, David Brown, in his book, Learning from Other Religions. He has this very powerful idea. He doesn't quite use this terminology, but I don't think it's imposing on him. When you do dialectic into dialogos as a practice with people soon start to realize, first of all, that the virtues are way beyond their comprehension, but simultaneously that makes the virtue more intimate to them, and they feel it calling to them more. But the point I want to get to is they find the unity of the virtues, that they all seem to be different ways in which wisdom is showing up. But it seems to me that religions tend to, and because they have to, because everybody's doing relevance realization, they foreground and background. So certain virtues are foregrounded in Christianity. And what Brown argues is we can learn from other religions how to at least temporarily foreground other virtues. So, for example, flow is not really well developed in Christianity, but Taoism can, wow, right? And look at what many people like Thomas Merton had to do in order to rebirth mindfulness within Christianity. They had to learn deeply from Buddhism, right? And he says, and notice what's going on right now. We're getting a resurgence of interest in icons, but he says, go to Hinduism, and they have the notion that when you're looking at the icon, and this is Eckhart, right? The God is also the same eye by which I see God as the eye by which God see. You have to get so for the Hindu, it's not only that you're looking through it to God, God is looking through it to you. And he said, what would happen if Christians foregrounded that more? Do you see what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to give you concrete examples of. So, the reason I want to focus on virtues is they're deep and they require transformation. They require deep loving, deep learning, really identifying, really imitating, internalizing, and indwelling. And it takes us off of, this is my doctrine, those are your doctrines. And I want to say something here, and I'm talking about wisdom and virtue. We could get into a metaphysical argument, which I'm happy to do if you want, but I'm going to ask not to double click on that right yet. All the research shows that if you're in a religious tradition, you do much better than secular people at cultivating wisdom and virtue. But that same research shows there's no reliable difference between the religious traditions. They're all equally good. This is exactly like all of the therapies have all these doctrinal differences, but when you look at the research, they all work about equally well. So the idea there, and again, I'm not saying we shouldn't do metaphysics. John Vervaeke will never utter that sentence. But I'm saying, at the sake of deep learning, we can say, look, I can learn virtues that have been backgrounded and marginalized in my tradition from how they have been foregrounded and centered and cultivated in yours. And that's a deep, profound learning. I think I understand what Nitter means when he says, without a Buddha, I couldn't be a Christian. I think I get what he's trying to talk about. That from I think it was in Buddhism he learned certain virtues that took him much deeper in his Christianity than he could have done elsewise. Just like how a friend can take you deeper into something than you can on your own. Sorry, I'm talking a lot, Elizabeth, but I'm just trying to.
It's your channel, John.
No, I want to listen too. But what do you think about this idea of, and like you work with Muslim people, and I don't mean work like like you extend. You were incredibly, and I don't mean this in some tepid romantic sense. I mean the philosophical movement, romanticism. You were like you were deeply moving in how you were trying to express, right, the loyalty and the sense of, I stand with these people in your defense of Muslims. You were there. have you learned anything? And I mean this is an open question. I'm not trying to got you, but like, have you picked up from them something that you might not, when if you might not have seen when you were wearing your sort of prototypical Christian glasses, and yet you wear the Muslim glasses for a while, or sorry, I should say, right, Islamic glasses, perhaps,
Yeah.
and then you do like tokens recovery. Then you go back and relook at Christianity and go, oh, has that happened to you?
Yeah, repeatedly. So I think it might be helpful to make clear that what I was talking about in Midwestry is we were talking about refugees and migration. We have a lot of refugees in our church who come from Muslim countries and Muslim backgrounds. Part of the reason they fled is they've become Christians. So those are the people that I have walked most closely with, and they have helped me into the experience of the deep precarity and struggle of being a refugee in an asylum hotel, which are very live in the UK debates at the moment. But through them and through relationships that are less close, I've realized that the experience they're going through is really not that radically dissimilar towards, like, they look the same on the street as the Muslim migrants. Like, people tell the same stories about them. The place where it's really, this kind of dialogue and this listening really helped me see my own faith is often through interviews on my podcast, The Sacred. So I've got one coming out next week with a guy who's a druid. He was the chief druid of the UK. And although he doesn't like being called the chief.
Wait. I want to know this. I just don't want to lose that fact. There's a chief druid of the UK.
Well, there is the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, and they have a leader who was called the chief druid for a long time. This guy, Philip Carl Gom.
Oh, wow.
Was very uncomfortable with the term chief druid, so he never used it. And it was only right at the end of the interview that was like, wait, were you the chief druid? And he was like, technically, yes.
Okay, so tell us about that.
Absolutely lovely man. I asked him why, as a teenager, he was drawn to Buddhism and then later Druidry. And he said, honestly, I think it was the difference between the picture of the Buddha sitting peacefully under a tree and Christ hanging in agony on a tree.
Right.
And I was drawn to the peaceful one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yes.
And I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
That symbol is saying such different things to you than it is to me. And you've just unlocked the semiotics of it in a way that I might just not have been able to see on my own.
That's a fantastic example, Elizabeth. Please say more. That's exactly what I was asking about. That's exactly it. Go.
Well, so this is how we learn in general, right? We have our, I do believe in persons and embodied persons with a soul, and we can see some part of the world and we have our experiences and we're formed in certain ways. But in order to be, Jonathan Rausch again says, in order to be a reality-rooted community, we have to be people who can take the perspective of other people. And this is just like key data for figuring out what life looks like. And so again and again, like I have Jewish friends who have taught me such deep things about how about suffering, essentially, like post-Holocaust, how do you navigate the meaning-destroying event of the Second World War? And I have to, last week so this might connect to your pilgrimage. Last week I was helping lead a pilgrimage run by some friends of mine who went to Harvard Divinity School. The person who founded it, Jewish background, but is an atheist, and started wondering, could she apply the spiritual technologies of sacred reading, pilgrimage, all these things to other texts. And so she started reading Jane Eyre and then Harry Potter and now Jane Austen. And I learnt my tradition's sacred reading practices from her. I learnt Lectio Divina. I learnt Havruta, which is a Jewish one. I learnt Pardes. I learnt Sacred Imagination. I didn't know any of those things. And I learnt them from an atheist who reflected them back to me. And again, I see more clearly because of what because of listening to what other people see, essentially.
That's so. Sorry for misrepresenting the people you were.
Not at all.
Um, uh, but I mean, the examples you gave were perfect and germane. And so now the interesting question. It sounds like we're really resonating on this, and this is what pilgrimage is. You go to a place, you go through Tolkien's recovery, you do the anthropological ethnographic shift, right, and you try to adjust to the place. You have a different person
Can you
who's a
tell me
different.
what Tolkien's recovery is?
Oh, Tolkien's recovery theory. So fantasy literature is just escapism, and he says fantasy literature can be escapism, but and this is where he's relying on the distinction between the real and the imaginary. Although I don't think he quite says it. Although he might invoke Coleridge's distinction, I might be misremembering that. But anyways, he says no. With good fantasy literature, it's like an anthropologist going to another country and they have to acclimatize to that. They have to put on new glasses, and then they keep the glasses on, and then they come back, and this is like T.S. Eliot, and they see the place again for the first
For the
time.
first time.
Right? Yeah. And he said that is recovery. You're recovering your world because of the fact that the best way, as you said, to see yourself is from another perspective through other people's eyes. And you can ritualize that. You can do it imaginally in literature, or you can do it literally in pilgrimage. And as I've been saying to everybody, the original meaning of theory, theoria, was people sometimes know, oh, that means contemplation, not explanation. But the original meaning, according to Nightingale and Ward, of theoria is pilgrimage. That's what theoria originally meant. You're going, and this is Charles Taylor's notion that I call meta noetic passage. If somebody's here and you're trying to do a premise by premise argument with them, you can't move them. But if you get them to go over here and then recover where they were, they can go, oh, and then you move them again, and then they go, oh, and then you move them again and go, oh, and that's what pilgrimage is, until you get the through line and it starts to take on a life of its own, and you're going through grieving and acculturation, and there's all this demand on you, and there was a place, and each one of these has a presence. There was, Istanbul or Rome or Seville. Each place has a presence, and then there was the presence of my interlocutor, like Jonathan Pajot or Charles Stang or Bishop Maximus, and then each place had a sage that the interlocutor was trying to presence to me through themselves and the geophilosophy and the architecture and the art. And so you're going through this again and again. That's recovery. You're doing this metanoetic recovery as you're going through pilgrimage.
Sort of cleaning your cognitive glasses.
If the doors of perceptions were cleansed, right,
Yeah.
then I would see things as they truly are, infinite. So that idea, right, brings me to what also emerged for me in the philosophical Silk Road, because I've been sort of slowly, from a cognitive scientific perspective, which I admit is not exhaustive. Okay, everybody hear that, but nevertheless, it is needed. You need a theory of the cognitive dimension of there's a cognitive scientific theory of mystical experience. I'm trying to get a paper published on it right now. Right, probably going to get published because it's in revision, etc. And then I've been also doing, and this came out of the philosophical Silk Road, the idea of sensed presence and shareable sensed presence. I talked about this in Chicago as what spirit is. And those are spiritual experiences. And one of the things religion does is trying to get like the mystical and the spiritual to live well together, because they can pull away from each other. And so why am I saying that? Because I had an experience that was mystical, spiritual, about, not about, with, I'll just be really honest here. I had a mystical, spiritual experience with God on the philosophical Silk Road. It was very profound. Um, and it was due to the journey. It was due to, I was reading an amazing book by Samantha Harvey called Orbital. I had been in 3 conferences talking about theosis and Barfield, and then I was suddenly alone in Zagreb in a country I'd never been. And all the right conditions were set, and I had, and and I came to realize, because been I've been always very critical of personal notions of God. God should be impersonal because of the Heideggerian critique. God is not a substance. God is not a thing. If you make God a thing, you're just subjecting him to the system of things. And I still think that all of that is correct. Wynne
Person's
in
not the
his
same as a
masterful.
thing.
No, exactly. But I didn't. Yes, and I am admitting a mistake. I'm publicly admitting a mistake, and and that's what I'm getting from Yanaris and Desmond and others. And Zuzialas. A person is not an individualized or individualizing substance. He says that boldly, right? And so I get that. But what Wynn's masterpiece, Renewing the Senses, he talks about people. He's going through James's religious conversions, like from the variety of religious experience, and James reporting on all these conversions. And there's this theme that keeps coming out where people have this flip where they go, instead of the universe as a container in which things are put in it that fill up, the universe becomes a face. The cosmos becomes a face in which every part signifies the whole, the way a human face does. And now you have the sense of reality facing you and calling to you in voluntary necessity, right? The thing that's at the core of love and reason and beauty. You find it intrinsically good because it's the really real, and it's just good because it's really. And these are all the features we have as we encounter persons. They're intrinsically good. They call to us. They make demands on us. They face us, leaven us, etc. And I had a very powerful version of that. And I came to realize, for all my critiquing of dichotomies, I was carrying one around, which is, the impersonal, personal, and that Spinoza talks about the face of the cosmos, and Spinoza is often misrepresented as God equals nature. That's not Spinoza. It is God, nature, look through them to what is beyond them, because God is actually an infinity of attributes, and those are only 2 of him. So, right? And that's what I realized. I realized that either the purely personal or purely impersonal were somehow inadequate. That's what came to me. Why am I saying all of this? Because I'm trying to be really existentially honest with you. I don't like the word authentic because it's part of the autonomous self mythology. So as I get into and find myself increasingly loyal to the philosophical Silk Road, which has transformed me. I used to always carry a cloak of melancholy that I think was part of the wounding from fundamentalist Christianity, and I no longer wear that. I'm in the midst of Meniere's flare-up, which normally makes me dark and despairing. I'm not kicking up my heels because it's Meniere's, but I'm not in despair. And so you can't get into this. What I'm saying is we're talking about it, and that's good that we're talking about it, but I think if we really pursue what we're talking about, it can't leave our sensed presence of the sacred as it was. I think that this interreligious dialogos, I don't want to say dialogue, is part of the way in which the sacred is trying to renew itself and renew us towards it right now. And that for me means a reconsideration of what we mean by the sacred or God. That was a long speech because I'm trying to get to something that is really important to me because, well, I consider you a worthy interlocutor to bring it up with, and to just how does all of that, what does that do? Does that resonate for you? What does that sing to you? Does it to something? Does it? I like to talk about how relevance realization becomes resonance realization when things ring true for us. Is that ringing true for you, or what's it provoking in you?
It's mainly provoking joy for you to say I used to carry a cloak of melancholy and I don't wear it anymore. I'm just really glad about that. So I got a bit distracted by that. So I became, well, I don't know, this language falls apart, but the simplest way to narrate it is I became a Christian when I was 14-ish, 15 maybe. And it was through, noticed in your book you call them altered states of consciousness, ASCs.
Yes.
Driest possible way of describing the thing.
Oh, and they're called pivotal mental states because they make you epistemically vulnerable. It's all important language, and when you say it, it sounds like, and here's a little piece of your brain. Yes. Yeah.
The way I had an encounter with capital L love, right? It was a meeting.
Yeah.
And everything has flowed from there. And this thread I'm trying to pull on about relationality and difference, it does feel like it goes all the way down somehow.
Yes.
And again, in my tradition, there's different parts of it speak about this very differently.
Yes.
But I think at least one orthodox interpretation is God and humans are not the same, right?
Yeah. Yes.
That we are made in the image of God and are not God, and yet we are loved. Mm-hmm. That while we were still far off, he came towards us. Mm-hmm. Right? And this is where I feel very out of my depth in terms of, is there a big difference here with Buddhism or with Taoist dharmic religions? Like, I'm always interested in whether this concept of oneness puts less emphasis on difference. Jonathan Sachs, a wonderful Jewish thinker, rabbi.
I've read one of his books.
Amazing. He talks one of the books called The Dignity of Difference, and it was very formative for me. And I think Buber goes there as well, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Almost, and this is where it links to the erotic. That you actually can't. It's the difference. It's the seeing from the outside. It's the uncontrollability. It's the instability, actually, of being out from ourselves. Like secure skull-sized kingdoms, as David Bentley Hart talks about it. That is where aliveness is, and where eros is, and where love happens. And we want relationality that is safe.
Yes.
We want love that doesn't challenge or question us or make us reassess our beliefs or ask difficult questions of us. And so we're deeply lonely because that's not a thing. And coming to go and this is where I was trying to push Rodrea, who agree with loads of stuff on and deeply disagree with loads of stuff on. I think we have at Midwest Street, we have a fundamentally different understanding of difference. Mm-hmm. And I think, I don't know where he'd locate it in his political theology or in his theology, but the deeper I go into the New Testament, and again, we pick the bits we like, and it's polyphonic, and I'm like, I like John because he's mystical, and other people like Mark because he's a little bit more, I'm fully aware of the perspectival nature of my reading of my scriptures and how I bring in all my priors and all my biases. But something about Trinitarian theology, and then this command of Jesus to disrupt the tribes and to stop drawing lines and to not just love our neighbors, but love our enemies, feels to me to be saying something about difference being central to how we grow up ourselves and become fully human. So yeah, that encounter with the personal nature of reality, and I think the personal nature of reality is God, love, and the fact that difference is somehow required in there. I wonder if we're feeling our way around similar things.
I think we are. I think we're doing Plato's perambulation. We're doing circumnavigation around it, which, like the men around the elephant, if we can pick up on a good aspect of of it. If they were actually moving and they could bump into each other, it would be a better analogy. That's one way.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Yeah.
um, um, yeah, it's like I said, I Tillich talks about, as I've invoked, the autonomous autonomy. Autonomy is the magic word of the Enlightenment.
Mm.
This, and make autonomous and therefore atomize the true from the good and from the beautiful. And then Habermas goes, oh my gosh, we got to somehow put them back together,
Mm.
etc. But Tillich says, well, there's that, but there's also heteronomy, in which we are being oppressed and we are being destroyed, and we are losing agency, selfhood, and personhood. He often equates that with the demonic, a heteronomous
Interesting.
that destroys our agency, our selfhood, and our personhood, and the three levels of meaning in life that go with that. And he says, but what we're being offered is, he says in Christianity, later on, he opens it up when he starts to talk about the world religions. But he says, we're offered something that's neither autonomy nor heteronomy, and this is theonomy. Which is what I think the state of theosis brings us into. It doesn't bring us into ontological, we're ontologically identical to God, but we are deeply participating in God as this capacity for deep communal being. Whereas theonomy is where we experience, and when people say, what do you mean theonomy? Well, it's neither you're doing it, like this conversation has an aspect of I'm not making it, you're not making it. It's taking shape and it's taking place and it's leading us to, um, but to give you how you sense it, and this is all the work I've been doing around like Frankfurt's notion about voluntary necessity, the kind of voluntary necessity you find in a good argument that is compelling but not compulsive, or love. I can do no other but love Sarah, and yet I don't feel like I'm imprisoned or losing my agency.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful thing, and I feel compelled to behold it. Listen to the word, by the way, beheld, behold it, but I don't feel like I'm losing my agency, right? Johannes, not Johannes, Jonas in The Phenomenon of Life calls life a needful freedom, right? All of these things where, right, it's neither autonomous nor heteronomous. It's this, and I think why we think of those things central, and how Plato kept trying to find the through line between all of them: reason, love, beauty, resonance, right? He's trying to find them all. I think those are all our sensed presence of when we're in a theonomous uh, kind of situation, as opposed to an autonomous, or as opposed to a heteronomous. We're not buffered against the demonic, and that's one of the reasons, by the way, by the buffered self arises, because it was trying to protect people, to keep them protected from a world that was looking increasingly uh,
Mm.
absurd and demonic. And then we get secularized versions of that. Um,
Mm.
and so that's why, and these two vacillate from each other. So, for example, we are constantly being promised from the Enlightenment on autonomy, and we are giving ourselves over to technology and institutions that promise autonomy while actually are heteronomous and putting us into deep, deep service. Um,
Mm.
and so this is a radical thing we're trying to wrestle with here. And I think we have that. When Bishop Maximus gave me his uh, his lecture on what Clement meant by faith, and I said, I think what Clement's talking about is this voluntary necessity that's at the core of all these things. And he turned to me and he said, John, that's a perfect argument. I said, okay, good. I obviously landed somewhere. I think that's what faith is. It's not believing without evidence. It's that sense that keys us into theonomous communal being, because that's what reality is fundamentally like. And so
Mm.
that, I think, is uh, why we want to recognize the irremovability of difference, because the thing that distinguishes theonomy from autonomy and heteronomy is the preservation, and this is Desmond's point, the preservation of difference. The two other ones are trying to destroy difference.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. The phrase that is used a lot in my world is right relationship.
Yes.
That if you cash out, I don't like that economic phrasing. If you follow through on the
flesh out is good because it's embodied and alive, right?
Yeah, flesh out, exactly. I'm trying to avoid too many unnecessary economic and machine metaphors. Flesh out, follow the thread of a Trinitarian anthropology, which, as you say, doesn't make any sense in like the thin definition we have of logic and reason, like
doesn't
both three and one, the relationship as defining reality with difference within it. You know, that who is God? God is a relationship. You have to sit with the mystery, and in sort of ceasing to resist that mystery and allowing it to work on you, it begins to, I think, illuminate the structure of so many things. That the desire to run away from difference or subdue difference to step, because it's like, and this is, you know, again, very on brand, but I've always have to talk about sin in some form. This is my understanding of the sin of pride.
Yeah.
Is the desire for autonomy, which dislocates us from the body that we are a member of each other, right? That seeks to fracture the relationships that we are made for, because we don't want to need each other. We don't want to be made for each other and made by each other. We want to resist that and turn in on ourselves. And we're in a time when we're repeatedly affirmed in that and encouraged in it and told that that's efficient and righteous and all these things. And it is one of the notes that resonates across a lot of different traditions that I think we can, if we could sing together whilst holding the slight discordance and the difference, that something deeply true that we need to understand about what human beings are like could be perhaps heard more strongly.
Well, I want to pick up on that. You said, the mystery of God's communal nature. And again, I'll quote Tillich. He says, look, when there's the self-disclosure of the mystery, it doesn't cease being mystery, because then it wasn't a mystery, it was just a puzzle, right? And here's the key, right? That's not what it is, right? And what I want to say is, but being in ratio religio, rightly proportioned connectedness to that reality, and I don't think this is instrumentalizing God, because I don't want to do that. But what that means is we get an arena for practicing, because everybody ultimately has a mystery in them, right? If that's what difference actually is, that's its ontological grounding. If I ever think I completely get you, I have made a deep, fundamental ontological mistake. And you and I both know this. We're in long-term relationships, and if you ever come to, I get him, I get her, you're in deep trouble. Like, you have to have beginner's mind every single day of a relationship.
That's what keeps us interesting and
enjoyable. Of course. But what I'm saying is, the mystery of God actually gives us something into which we can enter into proper resonance that rings true for us, and that continually teaches us how to recognize the mystery in other people, which preserves the difference in the connection. It preserves it as community rather than heteronymous or autonomous or just homogeneous kind of existence. This is one of the things I'm seeing is like that. Again, I'm there's something about this language that I've got to get better, because it sounds like I'm instrumentalizing, and I'm not trying to do that. Because if I'm instrumentalizing a mystery, it's not a mystery. But I'm saying if we're in ratio religio with it, right, it properly tutors us, it properly educates us, draws from us the ability to recognize mystery. Imagine if you could do that with your partner, with your kids, with the natural environment.
As
Imagine what that would.
society.
Yes, exactly.
So I want to ask you something, because I'm thinking a lot about this, and one of the things I'm interested in is polarization and just the sort of fraying of civil society. And I think one of the like cognitive elements of this is, and from my very amateur understanding, is how deeply the brain dislikes uncertainty.
Yes.
Right? How we would rather be right than almost anything else. Even if we're right about something that's horrible, we'd rather like be certain that something bad is going to happen than stay in the discomfort of not knowing what's going to happen. And I read this thing today, someone saying, you know, we would rather deal with terrible systems than live through the uncertainty of something new emerging, because it, like, what is it? The brain takes a huge amount of energy. One, explain that to me. But I think that I relate that to the thing you said about religious practice helping you grow in virtues. Is one of the things it teaches you, if it's healthy, is that now we see through a glass darkly, right? It
Yes.
should teach you epistemic humility, because you are not God. And there is so much you don't know, and you get stuff wrong, and it should allow you to, and I have found this in my own life, I can tolerate uncertainty better the more time I spend in centering prayer, the more time I spend in contemplative practices. So I'd love to hear if you think those two things are related.
They are. Part of my scientific work I'm doing with Mark Miller and a bunch of other people is to integrate Carl Friston's predictive processing framework. That's my preferred name for it. It has 7 different names because we have to do that in psychology. Which
everyone has to claim originality.
Yeah. Predictive processing, which is that the brain has a common currency. What everything the brain is doing, it is trying to reduce being surprised. So it's got bottom down expectations, bottom up error, and what it's doing is trying to give you the meta ability to anticipate your environment. Because ceteris paribus, all else being equal, if I can anticipate better than you, I'm more intelligent than you. However, and this is part of where the work comes in, that's the more I open up predictive processing, the more I have to do. I confront a problem. Sorry, this will take a minute or two. Is that okay?
I love it.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. So the problem is you're trying to reduce surprise, and yet reality is set up with all these horrible trade-off relationships. If I explore, I can't exploit. And if I exploit, I can't explore. If I try to reduce bias, if I try to reduce underfitting, I'll overfit. If I try to reduce overfitting, I'll underfit, which I'm always doing when I'm trying to make predictions, right? Do I want to be a general purpose, or do I want to be a special purpose? Do I want to be mutually sensitive, or do I want to? This is relevance realization. You get these trade-off relationships. And so it has to build in this opponent processing. So an analogy I use for people is predictive processing is like genetics. It is how the brain is reproducing your sensory motor loop. Relevance realization is the natural selection, the Darwinian evolution on that's constantly reshaping it top down. So it's getting better and better at dealing with all of these unavoidable trade-offs. Now, that means that you're right. All else being equal, the brain prefers predictable unhappiness over surprising joy.
What we like.
Now, but the problem is, and this is the dark room problem. And for those of you who know predictive processing, the problem is if predictive processing is welded with relevance realization, like I've just argued, the problem with relevance realization, it makes you perpetually prone to self-deception. So you also have to be seeking self-correction, because the very processes that make you adaptive by getting you to ignore so much information make you self-deceptive by having you ignore so much information. And so the system also has to be self-corrective. So now it actually has these two things, which is try to keep things the same, but you better correct yourself. Now, there's two strategies for dealing with that sort of meta trade-off, which is, one is I'll try and find a very stable world. And then what I can do is cognitively evolve traits that fit me very well to that world. That works with, yes, that works. But it works if you can do what Bronze Age civilizations were able to do, creating long periods of very stable social environmental structure. That works, and that gets ingrained, right? But it doesn't work in a situation, even biologically, by analogy, where their environment is radically changing. What the strategy changes, and biology is the science of the paradigm shift. It's not physics. I keep saying that. Look at the work of Michael Levin. Look at the work. I'll just read Philip Ball's book, How Life Works. When evolutionary biologists now talk about the evolution of evolvability, which is not to evolve a trait that's plugging into how things are the same. It's evolving your ability to evolve because you're plugging into how things are constantly changing. Because if I can keep up with the change better than you, I'll survive better than you. And so I think part of the advent of the sacred is shouting to us, you got to move from evolving traits of your religiosity into evolving your evolvability of your religiosity. And so I don't think we have to be locked into, like you said, right, pursuing the same. I think there are people who foreshadowed, is that the right word? It sounds dark and I don't mean it. I think the Buddha, the Jesus, these people unlocked what the evolution of evolvability cognitively, biologically looks like for us. Stephen Batchelor, when he was talking about, along with others, about the Buddha, he said the Buddha was, I think saying the Buddha was enlightened was that the Buddha was in a continual flow state. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The flow state demands that the environment is constantly changing and you're constantly insight and self-transcending in order to deal with it. I think what I'm proposing, so I'm not saying I can establish this, I'm proposing that these people act as models of where virtuosity meets virtue in this new notion that what we're being called to. And that's what I was trying to say, and it got misrepresented as fundamentalist Westiary, that, right, we are confronting new ontologies. The cyborg, social media, right? AGI, these are new ontologies for us. And we have, and they are not going at a rate, they're going non-linear. We have to evolve our evolvability. Sorry, that's a long answer, but that's my answer to you. We have that proclivity, but we have to remember that the predictive bound up with relevance realization, and relevance realization is the machinery of insight. It's the machinery of aha. It's the machinery of that moment of cognitive evolution.
Yeah. So one thing I'm thinking is I'm beginning to be familiar with your work, but I wish we could have a glossary afterwards for people. This is the they've come because I've tweeted about it and they're like, it's the first time I've heard John, and there's 9 phrases in there I don't understand, but I will maybe figure out ways to do a glossary because it's all incredibly rich. But honestly, I have an orthogonal question, if that's okay.
Of course it's okay.
So on the podcast that I host, where I'm trying to model curious, empathetic conversations with people, some of whom are very similar to me, but many of whom are very, very different from me. And I'm kind of dropping in some like New Testament nonviolent ethic and some behavioral psychology and everything I've learned about what does it take for us to be people who can do this work. And one of the things I do is I talk about predictive processing, and I talk about when you come to the conversation and you see the name or you see what someone looks like or you see their bio, you already have a working model, right? You have your brain is guessing who this person is going to be.
Sure.
And we have reward systems, which mean because we really like to be right. As soon as they say something that you are expecting them to say, you'll go, huh, yeah, I knew that. And that reward mechanism can be okay, but it generally shrinks us. And what I'm trying to invite people into is this hunch that I have based on almost no research into the cognitive psychology of it, that there is a reward mechanism around surprise. Because
There is.
I feel it.
There is. It's called
it is called
insight.
Insight.
Insights are some of the most rewarding experiences people have. And part of the core of an insight moment is you realize that your expectations were wrong.
Yes. And it feels like when I have a working model with someone and they say something completely unexpected, sometimes I call it a braingasm. I'm like, ooh, that is not what I was expecting. I learned something. My horizons expanded. I love it. And what the project that I'm doing is I'm trying to say there is this loop we can get into and it's constantly being reinforced. But and what I'm saying is like, be someone prepared to listen to people different from yourselves, not because it's like earnest homework. We should do it to be good citizens. That is true. Yeah, but no one's going to be motivated to do that. That's not how it works. Do it because it's really fun and it's really interesting.
So this is the whole dialectic into dialogos, where people are given a structured practice such that they will propose what they want. They're allowed to revise, but they have to catch insights from other people. And then that has to be passed on and caught. And you get into this shared flow state around how the logos is taking on a life of its own. And what people say is, well, first of all, about reward, the flow state is the single most rewarding experience people have. It's optimal experience. And the flow state is just a cascade of insights. It's that I gave up think about rock climbing. I gave up my position. I had to reorient myself. And then I saw a new way forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
We have to pilgrimage.
Yes. Flow state. And the flow state is optimal. It's the optimal experience. People prefer it over pleasure. They prefer it over markers of self-esteem, or like it is preferred over other rewards, because read my 2018 chapter, the work on flow with Ferraro and Hera Bennett, because it is the evolution of evolvability. It is, you're training your insight machinery, you're training your intuition, and your brain is going, it's very plausible that you are picking up on the real causal connectedness to reality in a powerful way. This is highly rewarding, and people can learn to do it and generate it within a dialogical practice. That's what dialectic into dialogos does for people. And people say...
Could you just give us a very short definition of what dialectic into dialogos means?
So the reason why I use these two things is Plato talked about dialectic, but then there was Hegel, and Marx. So, okay, so we have to get back to what Plato was talking about. There are practices that we can do that set up the conditions, but we can't manufacture the logos showing up when that conversation catches fire between us. But we can set up conditions within and without and between us that make us more prone to catching that fire. And that's when dialectic moves into dialogos. So it's basically because, Kierkegaard has this great line, the world thinks it needs a new religion or new politics or new this, but maybe in all this knowledge, what it needs is a Socrates. And I thought, that's a great quote. The problem is, where is he? And then I realized from all the work we do on extended cognition, groups of people can act as Socrates for each other. So one person is the proposer, and then there's one person that's acting as the midwife. There's another person that's picking up on the vibe of the situation, and there's another person that's a scribe that's writing down different points, and they're all helping draw out the proposer. I propose that honesty is. You do this for a while, then you get to a certain stage, and then it passes to the midwife. The midwife becomes the proposer, and the whole cycle. And you do it through 4 people. Why 4? Because you know how many chunks you can hold in working memory? 4. That's why we picked 4. Okay, so 4. And once it's gone around, you go into what's called free dialogue, because almost always it catches fire and it starts to flow. And people say, I had one woman after we did dialectic into dialogos at a retreat, she said, I'm going to take up the life of virtue. She didn't say, I understand honesty better. She said,
Yeah.
and many people say that, I sense the presence of the virtue. I don't just have it as a concept. I feel how it's calling on it. And it's it's beyond my grasp. It becomes properly mysterious. That's happened. And when people have this, they experience a kind of eros, a kind of intimacy that is not sexual. And so all of this is happening, right? And then they say this very reliably: I've always been looking for this, although I didn't realize it. Like Platonic anamnesis. That's dialectic into dialogos. And it shows people, no, you actually find this way more rewarding, right? And there's so much unpredictability in this practice because it's creating resonance, and resonance requires unpredictability, uncontrollability. Now, you don't overwhelm people because that's horror. Now, Carl Friston would say, and I would agree with him, although I would say, Carl, and I'm going to be talking to him in October, you need relevance realization theory. I think he'll probably agree with me, by the way. But he'll say, yeah, but what's happening is predictive processing is going from local reduction of surprise, and it's trying to get global reduction. Yes, and that's what I mean by the evolution of evolvability rather than, specific fixed traits. It's a malleable mindset rather than a fixed mindset.
Thank you. That makes sense to me. And I'm going to say, to try to invite people into how pleasurable insight is. And I think we know it, right? People know that learning something feels good. So it's the number one reason people give for listening to podcasts. They like learning something, but it has to be
insight.
A deep learning. Yeah.
Because if it's incremental, people won't get this. Insight has an element of self-correction in it that regular incremental learning doesn't have. It doesn't have the sense of reframing, reorientation. That's what is particularly rewarding for people. So it's like the distinction between curiosity and wonder. Curiosity is you have a gap and you want it filled. Wonder is you want to call yourself and your world into question. Insight is a wonder experience. Wisdom begins in wonder. It's not a curiosity experience.
And this is why I think it all goes back to, it all connects back to humility, because the control impulse, the C.S. Lewis stuff I was talking about at Midwestery, like to go out from the self, to as you said, like let go of your position on the rock in order to find the next position, is a form of surrender of the self, right? C.S. Lewis talks about self-annihilation.
You have to.
We have to be somehow trust that we are held enough to go, if I change my mind, I won't die. Which is not something you're encouraged to do that much.
Well, I'll tell you, when you're sparring with people, one of the things you can do, and it's kind of mischievous, you can compliment them on something they just did. Because then what they do is they become focused and they're trying to control and repeat it, and then you have them. Then you have them.
Master manipulator behind the scenes.
Well, I was taught, like when you're fighting, and you never fight if you can avoid it, because even when you win, you lose. But sometimes there is no alternative. Lives are at stake, right? But like you don't just fight with the person's body; you're actually fighting also with their mind. The point I was trying to make, though, before getting into the martial arts, but the idea that when people, like, you have to be able to trust the flow state. You have to be able to, like Socrates, he says this and it's easy to say, but really try it. We have to follow the logos no matter where it goes. And for me, that's just that to me is like a motto for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it rhymes. My version of that would be like the spirit blows where it will.
Exactly.
Come from, don't know where it's going.
I often pair those two together. Elizabeth, we're going to call this part of it to a close, so we have some time for some questions. But before we go off the public arena into my community on the lectern, any last words you might have? My last words are thank you. This was this was greater than I predicted it was going to be.
No last words other than what a treat. I'm gonna have to look at the transcript to be like, and I came to understand that, and that applies to that. But I'm buzzing.
Good. Me too.